Good day. I want to begin with a simple story. Picture young women in South Africa, let's call her Leslie. Leslie wakes up each morning to a world that feels unyielding. She's a bright, talented person, but she's been unemployed for 2 years now. Each rejected job application, each dead-end interview has slowly drained her hope. At some point, Leslie quietly started telling herself, well, maybe this is it. Maybe my story has already been written and it doesn't have a happy ending. Have you ever felt like that? Like your story was over before it really got started? That feeling of giving up on your own future. Psychologists actually have a name for it. They call it narrative foreclosure. Narrative foreclosure. The premature conviction that one's life story has effectively ended. That there are no new chapters left to write. It's a heavy place to be. Leslie was there. Maybe some of us have been there too, in our own ways, in our own contexts. But today, I want to share how Leslie's story didn't end there and how yours doesn't have to either. It turns out we can reinvent our stories by first learning to calm our bodies and then reimagining our lives. In other words, personal innovation, reinventing oneself or re-sculpting our lives. And that happens from the inside out. It starts with finding safety in our nervous system and then an alternative story in our minds. When we feel safe, we can open up. When we open up, we can rewrite the narrative of who we are and where we're going. And with a new story, we find the courage to take action and change our lives. I discovered this through an approach that blends a bit of neuroscience with the art of storytelling, drawing from something called polyvagal theory and from narrative practice. Don't worry, I won't dive into academic jargon here today. Instead, I want to share why feeling safe inside, why that can spark creativity, how changing our personal story can unlock growth, and what this looks like in real life. Through people like Leslie, people who've overcome hardship right here in South Africa. So let's start with our bodies, with feeling safe. Have you noticed how hard it is to be creative or brave when you're scared out of your wits? It's nearly impossible. If a lion walked through that door right now, none of us would be brainstorming new business ideas or planning our 5-year goals. We'd be in survival mode. Our bodies have a brilliant built-in safety system, and polyvagal theory, developed by neuroscientist Dr. Stephen Porges, helps explain it in simple terms. It says our nervous system has 3 key states. Think of them like 3 gears or even traffic lights that drive our emotions and behavior. First, ventral vagal, the safe and social green zone. This is our calm, grounded state, where we feel safe, connected, and at ease. Our heart is normal, breathing is steady. You know that warm, secure feeling when you're with close friends or family, laughing at a braai on a Sunday afternoon. That's the ventral vagal state. the green light zone, where you feel safe enough to be curious and creative. In this state, the world feels welcoming. You can engage with people, imagine possibilities, play and innovate, because deep down, your body is saying, it's okay, you're safe here. And then the second one, the sympathetic or fight or flight, the yellow zone. This is the high alert, charged up state. Think of it as your body's accelerator. When you perceive a challenge or threat, your sympathetic nervous system kicks in. Heart pumping, adrenaline flowing. It's like hearing a car alarm go off. Your system gets loud and urgent. In small doses, this state can be helpful. Ever had a deadline that got your heart racing, but also gave you a burst of focus and energy? That's the sympathetic arousal helping you out, giving you the adrenaline to tackle a challenge. A bit of stress can spark creativity or quick problem solving, like feeling butterflies before a big pitch that sharpen your performance. But if the dial goes up too high, the yellow zone turns to red, panic, anxiety, even rage. In extreme fight or flight, our thinking narrows. It's as if our brain says, no time to create, just react or run. Not exactly ideal for innovation. And then third, the dorsal vagal, shutdown, red zone. This is the collapse mode, where when overwhelm hits, it's our body's emergency brake. If stress becomes unbearable or goes on too long, the nervous system can slam on the brakes and shut down. Imagine a phone that's on 1% battery, goes into low power mode, maybe turns off some functions, or just dies altogether. In dorsal vagal shutdown, heart rate and energy plummet. You might feel numb, disconnected, frozen, like your mind and body check out. Think of times when someone says, I just can't get out of bed. After weeks of relentless adversity, that's the red zone. In this state, people often lose their sense of future possibilities. It's a physiological and emotional shutdown. Have you ever felt so defeated that you just wanted to crawl under the covers and disappear? That's dorsal vagal in action. And here's what's really interesting. When we're in this shutdown state, we tend to believe the bleakest stories about ourselves. What's the point? Nothing will ever change, we tell ourselves. In Leslie's case, after so many disappointments, her body was in a kind of shutdown. She felt hopeless, and her mind concluded, my story is over. It's a biological state feeding a narrative of despair. Our minds listen to 80% of what our bodies tell us. Polyvagal theory basically says we all unconsciously scan our environment for cues of safety or danger. Something Dr. Porges calls neuroception. Our body is always asking, am I safe? Do I need to protect myself right now? If it senses danger, it shifts into those survival states, the yellow or red. If it senses safety, it moves into the green zone. Why does this matter for personal innovation? Because if you want to change your life, start a business, learn a new skill, reinvent your career, reinvent your marriage, you must be able to access that green, safe and social state. Psychological safety is the foundation of creativity and change. We simply can't innovate when we're stuck in survival mode. Think about it. When you feel safe, you can take risks and explore. You're not just surviving, you're living. But when you feel threatened or hopeless, your perspective literally narrows to just getting through the day. Research confirms this. Teams and individuals are most creative when they feel safe and curious, not when they feel scared. So the first step in reinventing yourself is learning how to shift into that safe zone and stay there long enough to dream again. How do we do that? How do we cultivate this sense of safety for ourselves, especially in tough circumstances? The key is to learn regulation, simple practices to nudge our nervous system toward calm. Slow breathing, for example, is like telling your body, hey, it's okay. We're not running from a lion right now. Spending time with supportive friends or mentors can also remind your system that you're safe. We humans actually co-regulate each other, calming each other through connection. Leslie started doing something very simple. Each morning, instead of immediately grappling with her worries, she took 5 minutes to breathe deeply and stretch. It sounded almost trivial, but that little ritual was her way of grounding herself, telling her nervous system, you are safe, right here, right now. She also joined a local community group, a kind of support circle for young job seekers. In that group, everyone shared their struggles openly. They even began meetings with a quick mindfulness exercise just to settle everyone's nerves. Over time, Leslie's body got a new message. I belong. I'm supported. This is psychological safety in action. A feeling of trust that allowed her to relax out of her survival mode. And once she had even a small island of calm in the sea of stress, something remarkable happened. Leslie began to imagine possibilities again. This brings us to the second part, story. Safety, the first part, story, the second part. See, if it wasn't enough for Leslie to just feel calmer, she also needed to change the story she was telling herself. Earlier, I described how she felt the story was over. We all carry stories about who we are. I'm a successful one. I'm the unsuccessful one, the failure. Or I'm not cut out for this. Or I always mess things up. These stories can guide us, or, in many cases, limit us. Stories become the lenses through which we see the world and ourselves. In Leslie's narrative, she was a failure, a victim of circumstance with no future. That narrative was a dead end. It kept her stuck. So in our model of personal innovation, after safety comes story. reauthoring our narrative. In fact, one of my favorite sayings is, we live by the stories we tell about ourselves. If we want to change, we have to change those core stories. Let's talk about narrative foreclosure again. That fancy term, the fancy term for believing your life's plot is finished. It smothers innovation. Because if you truly think there's no next chapter, you won't take steps to create one. Leslie had to confront this in herself. With the help of a mentor at the support group, she started to rewrite her story. How? Through some classic narrative techniques, though we didn't call them that at the time. She journaled about her life, almost like she was writing a book about herself. She reflected on earlier chapters of her life, times she overcame challenges. For instance, she wrote about how she had struggled to pass a math class in high school, but eventually succeeded. That was a victory she'd forgotten. She listed qualities she knew she had. She was kind, resourceful, a hard worker. Bit by bit, she began to see that the story of I'm a failure wasn't the whole story. It was just one interpretation of the events. We are interpretive beings. We try and make sense of things. But with encouragement, she started telling a new story. Yes, I faced a lot of obstacles, but I'm resilient. Unemployment is only a chapter in my life, not the ending. My story is still being written. This process is what narrative practitioners might call reauthoring, looking at the events of your life through a different lens to reveal strengths and possibilities. Leslie essentially went from seeing herself as a failure to seeing herself as a fighter, someone who had overcome adversity and could do it again. She didn't deny the challenges. She simply began to change her perspective on them. Instead of only recognizing events which support a narrative of I'm unlucky and nothing works out, she began to see those which combine to create a story of I have learned hard lessons and they are guiding me to try something new. I remember one day she said to me, maybe all these rejections are pushing me to create my own opportunity. Maybe I'm supposed to start something myself. Got goosebumps because that is the sound of a new narrative taking shape. One that opens doors instead of slamming them shut. Now I want to highlight something important. None of this is about positive thinking in a superficial way. It's not just telling yourself nice affirmations in the mirror. It's deeper. It's deeper. It's about truly believing a new story because you've recognized the lie of the old one. In Leslie's case, understanding a bit of polyvagal theory actually helped her to create a new story and allow that new story becoming grounded. She realized that her feelings of hopelessness weren't because she was truly hopeless or broken, that they were partly her body's natural response to prolonged stress. When she felt numb and defeated, it wasn't really that she was weak. It was her nervous system protecting her by going into shutdown. Just learning that was a huge relief for her. I went into survival mode because I was overwhelmed. But that's not who I am. It's something my body did to cope. This insight became part of a new narrative. I'm not a quitter, not a failure. In fact, I survived a really hard time. And now I'm healing and moving forward. You see how the story shifted from a closed book to an open book, with chapters yet to come. Once Leslie felt safer and started to re-author her story, she arrived at the third part of personal innovation: strategy, taking action. This is where the theory becomes practice. A new story and a regulated nervous system set the stage. But innovation means doing something new in your life. It doesn't have to be a giant leap. In fact, it often starts with tiny steps. Leslie decided on a small but significant step. Remember that idea that maybe she was meant to create her own opportunity? It kept nagging at her, in a good way. In a journal, she wrote a future chapter, a vision of herself a year from now, running a small business of her own. This was just a daydream at first, a what if. But then we talked about how she might test that idea. She loved baking, had a secret talent for making delicious muffins and scones. So, for the first step, she simply baked a batch of muffins. Sold them outside a local church on a Sunday. She was terrified, by the way. Her hands were literally shaking as she set up a tiny table with a handwritten sign. We'd practiced some breathing beforehand, so she could keep in that ventral green state and not bolt when her anxiety spiked. And guess what? People loved her muffins. That one little success didn't magically solve all her problems, but it gave her a glimpse of a new path. She started doing this every weekend, then took another step. With some help, she pitched her idea to a young entrepreneurship program, which provided a small grant for equipment. Each step was an experiment in a new way of being, and each one built her confidence. This is what I mean by strategy: translating the inner changes into outward action, one small innovation at a time. It could be applying for one job that scares you a bit, enrolling in that course you've been putting off, or starting a community project in your neighborhood. It's any step that moves you toward the life in your new story. And the beautiful thing about using polyvagal theory in this stage is that you can use your body as a compass. As Leslie took these steps, she paid attention to her nervous system. If she felt excited, nervousness, that good stress, she'd push herself a little more. If she felt completely overwhelmed, that was a signal. Slow down. Maybe return to a safety practice or break the task into smaller bits. She didn't do this alone either. Remember that support group? She leaned on them, shared a new story with her friends, got their encouragement. Innovation doesn't happen in isolation. Innovation doesn't happen in isolation. We need allies. Those friends became her accountability partners, her cheerleaders, and sometimes a calming presence on tough days. This kind of social support is actually Another polyvagal insight. We regulate better and dare more when we co-regulate, when we have others we trust by our side. Slowly but surely, Leslie moved from personal innovation to something bigger. She started inspiring others in the group. Her courage was contagious. Now, I've been speaking about Leslie's journey in 3 parts: safety, story, strategy, the 3 S's. But it's important to say that this isn't a one-time sequence or a simple recipe. In reality, we cycle through these parts again and again. Every new challenge might unsettle our safety. Every big step might require a story tweak or finding calm before the next move. But over time, working through this cycle makes you really good at change. It's like exercising a muscle, your resilience muscle. You get more familiar with your own body's signals, more skilled at reframing setbacks as plot twists rather than game over. You become, in a sense, the author of your life story and also its lead innovator. And these ideas don't just apply to individuals. I've seen community leaders here in South Africa use the same principles to spark innovation in their own groups. I learned about the local youth centre in Cape Town, for example. Started holding safe space circles every week. They'd begin with everyone taking a deep breath together and sharing something positive. It might sound touchy-feely, but you know what happened? The young people in that circle started to open up. They felt safe. When they felt safe, they started tossing out the craziest, most brilliant ideas for community projects. Ideas they never would have shared when they felt tense or judged. In one case, a group of unemployment youth came up with a plan to start a community vegetable garden to fight hunger, learn farming skills. It was a wild success. When individuals feel safe, they can take risks, they can access creativity, they can co-create in ways otherwise impossible. I've seen a leader calm an anxious meeting by saying, let's all stand up and shake out the stress. It might have looked silly, but it reset everyone's nerves and brought laughter. I've seen a team that failed at something sit together and reframe the failure as a learning chapter rather than a tragedy. In each case, these groups are applying safety, story, strategy collectively. Create safety in the group. Shape a positive group story. Experiment together. The result is real innovation, not imposed from the top, but emerging from people's resilience and imagination. We've traveled through a lot of ideas, from the science of our nervous system to the art of personal storytelling. But let's bring it back to where we started. A young person who thought her life was over. Leslie's journey isn't some fairy tale. It's a real example of what can happen when we learn to feel safe, rewrite our stories, and take small steps forward. She hasn't just found a job. She's found a power. She's learned that she can calm herself when fear and anxiety rise. That she can choose the narrative she lives by. And that she can act on her dreams, even if it's scary. In short, she learned that the story isn't over. In fact, it's just beginning. So is yours, and mine, and that of everyone listening into this. I want to leave you with this. As long as we're alive, our story is still unfolding. No matter how trapped or lost you might feel right now, that red shutdown chapter doesn't have to be the final chapter. You have the tools inside you to find calm. Maybe it's through a breath, a walk, a hug from a friend. You have the ability to imagine a new narrative, to say, I am not defeated. I'm developing. I'm a work in progress. My next chapter can be something unexpected and beautiful. And you have the capacity to take one small step toward that new chapter, and then another, and another, with your body and mind as allies. This is what personal innovation is about. Reinventing yourself from the inside out. It's about realizing that the pen of your life story has been in your hands all along. And you can write something new at any time. Perhaps today, something in this talk has stirred a feeling in you. A spark of hope, a sense of awe at what might be possible. Hold on to that. Awe has a way of freeing us from our old, biased narratives. When you feel awe, gazing at a blazing orange sunset over the Drakensberg Mountains, or listening to a favorite song that gives you goosebumps, you shift beyond yourself, even if just for a moment. In those moments, the grip of I can't change loosens, and you glimpse a bigger world. Awe unlocks us. It reminds us that life is more expansive and mysterious than the little stories, those thin stories that trap us. You seek out those moments of awe and safety because they will nourish your creativity and courage to change. To anyone here who has felt like Leslie, felt stuck or small or finished, I can only say this. Your story is far, far from over. You have many new chapters ahead. You can regulate your inner space, reframe your narrative, and take brave actions, even if they're tiny at first. And if you stumble, remember, that's just a plot twist, not the end. Share your journey with others. Let them be characters in your story, and you in theirs. We're all co-authors in our communities. Together, we can create an environment where it's safe to dream and innovate. Today, when you finish watching this, I invite you to do one gentle thing. Take a deep breath and tell yourself one kind truth about your story. Maybe it's I'm still here, still trying. And that means my story continues. Because if it does, every day you wake up is a new page. You get to decide with compassion and courage what's written on it. Thank you for listening, and happy writing on the pages of your life. Thank you.